The Wisp, Chapter 27. Under a sky streaked with red on a palette of the palest blue, Bara stood alone and shivering in Library Square. Amy and Colin had already gone inside. After spending the night out in the cold, they needed to find shelter and fast. There were few places to go. They couldn't go back to the house, not until they had a plan. Discovery would have been all too likely in their dorm rooms. The library had seemed the only option. And so under the filmy color of twilight, they had slipped through the maples and oaks of Windfall, hoping to be inside and down in the stacks before the sun rose and they'd be clearly visible to anyone looking. Fortunately, at the early hour, the town was all but empty. Bara saw but one other person while she waited in the square, a tall teenage boy. At least she assumed he was a teenager. His face and hair were hidden under a hood. He passed the clock tower and took a left on Windfall Way. Bara didn't recognize him. She assumed he didn't know her either. There was something familiar about him, but they lived in the same town. She'd probably seen him around. A student at Windfall High after a coffee. Whatever the case, he didn't even look her way. Of course it was Miss Corey at the counter. Amy almost lost her nerve. She took a step back, bumping into Colin. He pushed her forward and then seated himself on a couch. He took out his cell and made a call. Miss Corey smiled at Amy. Like someone who'd mistaken a flea farm for talcum powder, Amy fidgeted. Anyone who knew her well would have known she was up to something. But Miss Corey didn't seem to catch on. She nodded and then started typing away on the computer, looking for some rare book Amy had no doubt said she needed. Things were unlikely to get much better. "Come in now," Colin whispered into his phone. "Make it quick." Bara hung up and tore herself free of the bush she'd taken cover behind. She rushed up the library steps, through the doors, and past the front desk. Colin watched Miss Corey. She never looked up. Bara was down the stairs, and Miss Corey was none the wiser. Colin returned his phone to his pocket. He crossed the foyer, whistling a nonsense tune. The signal to Amy their plan had been a success. Finishing on a long, high note, he went down and joined Bara in the lower stacks. Amy should have followed closely on their heels. She didn't. Bara was worried. "You should go up and check it out," she told Colin. He was already halfway up the staircase when an out-of-breath Amy came back. He was already halfway up the staircase when an out-of-breath Amy came up from behind. He retraced his steps. "What took you so long?" he asked. "Why didn't you use the stairs?" "I tried, but Miss Corey stopped me. She pointed out that all the books I'd asked about were on the 3rd floor. Go figure. She even came with me to find them. I had to wait for her to go back down. Then I took the elevator." "You took the elevator?" Almost no one ever used the old iron-caged elevator that stood like a geriatric dragon in the back corner of the library. It hissed and rattled and, yes, even smoked whenever it was used. Only those with a heavy load ever used the damnable thing. Original to Main Hall, it was far from being up to code, yet somehow it managed to jar itself between the floors without claiming lives or burning the place down. Still, it wasn't wise to tempt fate. "I had to, or she'd seen me come down," Amy explained. Colin shrugged. "Let's find somewhere to sit." They settled at a study carrel in their favorite corner. Colin and Amy grabbed 2 chairs and formed a human shield around Bara. It was time to talk. Faced with confessing she'd dug up a grave, Bara felt ashamed. She looked to stall and so put the spotlight on her friends. "What happened to you guys?" she asked. "When we realized that you were gone, we tried to retrace our steps. We weren't alone." Colin squinted as though in pain. "We had the pleasure of dealing with your sharp-toothed furry friend." "The wolf?" "No." "I guess it exists in real life as well as your dreams, and it must be immortal, too." "How did you get away?" Bara asked. "That's the thing. We figured after we ran for like eons, it didn't actually want to catch us." "We think it was toying with us," Amy told her. "Why would it bother to do that?" "Who knows? But when we figured it out, we stopped running. We were right. It charged us a couple more times, always stopping a few meters away. The next time it came at us, Colin charged back." "That was brave," Bara marveled. "And stupid. I thought it might run the other way." "Did it?" Colin gave a nervous laugh. "No. It came at me and knocked me to the ground. I thought I was a slice of Sunday bacon. I told Amy to run, but she didn't, thank God. She picked up a stick and started whacking away. But it didn't matter how hard I hit the thing. It acted like I was stroking it with a feather." Bara pointed out the obvious. "You're not torn to shreds, so what happened?" "It was the strangest thing. The wolf gave me this queer look. I'd sworn it was smiling at me. Then the damnable thing licked me from chin to forehead." "It licked you?" "Like a pet dog," Amy said. She giggled. Bara laughed too. Colin didn't. He spoke over their giggles. It finally got off me. Amy was still hitting away, but it moved like it had all the time in the world. It got off Colin, looked me in the eye, and growled. I got so scared I dropped the stick. I thought it would kill me, but it only sniffed like it hurt its feelings or something, and then walked away. We started looking for you, and there was the maze, only it was in a place we'd already looked. It was like it had moved or something. And that's it? That's it, Colin confirmed. Your turn. How did you find the maze? There'd be no more stalling. Bara took a deep breath and began her side of the tale. I lost you guys in the dark. I didn't even realize I was alone, not until I found the maze. I thought I was following Amy, but when I came into the clearing, the Wisp was there. I guess she'd led the way. The Wisp? Again? But how did you get through so fast? It took us forever. I remembered from my dreams. What happened when you got to the center? How did you find the dagger? I dug it up. You dug it up? Amy echoed. Do you mean you unearthed it from the grave? I know it's kind of gross. No, it's seriously gross, Amy corrected. What if it had been a dead body? But it wasn't. It was this. Bara reached into her bag and took out the dagger. The light of the library turned the green blade almost neon. Colin held out his hand and she handed it over. He lightly touched the tip. It was definitely sharp. A small bead of blood formed on his fingertip. Oddly, the blood sparked with silver and then dissolved to nothing. Colin looked at his finger. Not even a mark. He dropped the dagger on the desktop. What the hell were we supposed to do with that? Bara hesitated to share her thoughts. Killing her stepmother, as evil as she might be, wasn't really something Bara wanted to do. Digging up a grave at midnight was bad enough, but killing another human being? Was her stepmother human? Are witches human? Colin and Amy were waiting for her to say something. I don't know, but it must have some purpose. Maybe there's something in the diary. It was a possibility. Bara took the diary from her bag and placed it on the table next to the dagger. She opened to a random page. Way too quickly to be natural, the air in the library changed. As though someone had opened a door in a storm, a current traveled down the stairs, through the stacks, and found its way to their secluded corner. It worked on the open diary. Pages flipped with an invisible hand and then stopped. Creating a small vacuum in its wake, the supernatural wind then backed away from the book, retreating through the stacks, row after row, and finally up the stairs. Eventually everything was still again. Before them was a sketch of the dagger. It lay horizontally. On the next page was a drawing of an amber stone. The dagger seemed to be piercing it. They looked closer. This amber was different from those on the cover. There was what looked like an insect embedded within. They all knew that sometimes insects could get caught in tree sap and then be preserved over the millenniums as the sap turned to amber. Amy narrowed her eyes. I don't think it's an insect. Wait here. She retreated from the table and disappeared into the stacks. Colin and Bara continued to look down at the diary. Running over both pages was some very ornate calligraphy. Colin read, Mucro libertas ac begatio. It's Latin. They both attended Catholic schools. Along with Mass and religion, they took Latin. Libertas, that's liberty, right? Liberty or freedom, and legatio means imprisonment. Bara put the words together. The dagger of freedom and imprisonment. Just then, Amy returned. She had a magnifying glass. Amy brought it to the book. She gasped and handed the lens to Colin. It's not a bug, he said. It's a woman. Bara took the glass. She peered down to the page and saw long hair, long graceful limbs, and pale, pale skin. It's not a woman, she told him. It's the Wisp. Are you certain? Colin looked again. Bara didn't need a second look. Yes, absolutely. What does it mean? Courtney wore a locket, the locket the dark-haired boy had taken from the wolf. Cedric had said that Guinevere had worn amber around her neck contained in a locket. It had to be the same piece. Courtney has trapped the Wisp in amber, Bara said. The Wisp wants to be set free. The dagger of freedom and imprisonment, Colin read again. If the Wisp is your stepmother's prisoner, I guess it makes sense she'd come to you for help, since you can get close to the amber. The dagger must be able to free her somehow. He continued to stare down at the diary. The way it's drawn, it's kind of stabbing the dagger. You stab the amber and it frees the Wisp. They fell silent. It seemed a likely possibility. Bara was relieved. At least she wouldn't have to stab her stepmother. But are we sure we should set the Wisp free? Bara was relieved. At least she wouldn't have to stab her stepmother. But are we sure we should set the Wisp free? Amy asked. I mean, what is she? A ghost? A spirit? A slip spirit that Cedric talked about? What's a slip? We have no idea. We should wait, read more of the diary. The Wisp did say Bara from the wolf, Colin argued. Bara still hadn't told him that it had been the dark-haired boy who'd actually saved her from the wolf, and she hadn't told him about seeing his face in the cottage window. She wrote that off to a slip of a tired mind, or the circus dream. That one was just too weird. But if there were time to talk, now was it. She looked at Colin, and he was looking at her, and she chickened out. Besides, did it really matter? Bara knew deep down that her stepmother was evil. She had to be. Courtney was the problem. All we know is my stepmother is a witch. She drugged me and kept an innocent man prisoner and talked about killing him. And the wolf is her pet or something, remember? She controls it. I don't know what the Wisp is, but without her we would have never found out about Courtney. Amy still looked unconvinced. But yeah, Bara relented. We should read more of the diary, make sure. There was a low, rumbling sound. Amy's stomach. First, I think we need some coffee and food. Colin volunteered. I'll go. They're probably looking for you too, Amy said. They'll have noticed you missing. You're grounded, remember? No one will be looking for me. Why don't you two read ahead, see what else you can find out? Amy stood and put on her coat. Colin handed over some money. He and Bara watched her leave and then turned back to the diary. Bara flipped to where they'd ended off, but they had no chance to read. Bara heard them first. Colin noted her tense, and then he heard the footfalls. There were 2 sets. One was very heavy. It wasn't Amy returning. Bara pushed the diary into the bottom shelf of the study carrel and then handed Colin the dagger. He placed it in the inside pocket of his coat. The dagger disappeared only seconds before Courtney came upon them.
The Wisp is published on Amazon.com. Also available on Amazon is Monsters, Real and Imagined, Tragic, Frightening, and Funny, All Too Brief, a collection of short stories and poetry. Strays, a collection of short stories and philosophical love poems, and Tattoo, Calling All Soldiers Home, a collection of poems in brevity.